What's up, Buttercups? Welcome to Mean Age Daydream with me, your host, Brian McWilliams. I am a little tired today as I was celebrating St. Patty's Day yesterday, as I do every year, starting at 6 in the morning and going until about 6 in the evening. It's a proud tradition that is unlike any other. So, excuse my tired eyes and my tired voice, but I hope you all had a wonderful St. Patty's Day and it was not taken over by your local immigrant population. As I saw some viral videos going around with, I think it was like, Muslim immigrants or maybe Indian immigrants that were just taking over St. Patty's Day parade. Anyway, today I want to talk about a couple different topics. Number one on the list is Cuba and what's happening down there in the island nation, the communist island nation, the very failed communist island nation of Cuba, and whether or not the United States really needs to take an active role in bringing that nation down. Apparently, there are negotiations coming on. So I want to talk about that. We'll do a little Oscar talk, and then we will wrap it up by talking about something that I found fascinating, also a little bit terrifying, which is consciousness being transferred into a computer program. But before we get into all that, I want to remind you guys to please hit the subscribe button. Please make sure that you subscribe to the main network feed, as well as the individual feeds. And of course, we have politics, our new show that we get together as a group and do. And of course, you can buy Woke Word Wars online at Amazon.com, my card game that makes fun of leftist politics, but really is just a great time for anybody. All right. So let's talk Cuba here, because as of right now, Cuba is in talks with the Trump administration. Of course, the Trump administration had put essentially a blockade on Cuba, halting shipments from our allies, from, these other nations. Now, reportedly, Russia is sending a tanker in violation of the blockade and in violation of the sanctions we placed on them, as is a ship coming out of Hong Kong, or at least flying a Hong Kong flag. This is just coming out as of a few hours ago from the Moscow Times, which I'm sure is a government-run publication. But that provides a little bit of tension, because the island nation has been without a fuel shipment, I think, for something like 3 months. You're talking about a absolute collapse economically of a country that was already on very shaky turf. You're talking about energy shortages. You're talking about massive power outages. They've got no backup generators they can use because they've got no fuel. So you're seeing revolts in the street. Now, with these negotiations, the Trump administration is partaking in, you also have Trump outwardly saying, look, I want that leadership to change. And apparently there is, in fact, some interest in doing that and taking that up and in actually having a change away from this communist regime that's been ushered in there. They'll say they have a president, but it's obviously a dictator that's been chosen by the elites there that are still driving their people into the ground. And what's extra funny is that you're seeing a real hunger, I think, among that population, right? We see all of the refugees that have been fleeing from Cuba for decades now that go to places like Miami, and how much they hate the leadership in Cuba. I mean, my wife went to a Pitbull concert, of course, Pitbull's from Cuba, and he was talking about how much communism sucks. And in the wake of this, in the wake of all of these shortages, in the wake of all of this poverty, in the wake of all this pain, you've got the democratic socialists of America who will tell you to your face that Cuba is a wonderful place, that the Cuban healthcare system is fantastic, that their hospitals are pristine, all of which is horseshit, by the way. These are people that are too stupid to understand what propaganda is, but yet to defend their very, very, destroyed worldview that doesn't have a single instance of working in the history of humanity, they will cling to the lie rather than admit the truth is much darker than they want. So they have said that they are going to go over and show their support and help prop up the Cuban communist regime, as if that's going to do anything, as if having a bunch of rich suburban white dingleberries, which is all of these democratic socialists, are the same type of person, right? They're all spoiled rotten. They, for some reason, they have unbelievable white guilt. They tend to buy into the fact that they all have different maladies. You'll remember the classic clip of the Democratic Socialist Convention where they asked people not to clap too loud, not to cheer, and to do gentle like snapping or something like that because of those among them that had auditory issues. Not that they couldn't hear, but that they were sensitive. They were triggered by people clapping or loud noises. So these are the type of people that we're expected to see go over, rally the starving poor of Cuba that are sitting there in the darkness. They're going to convince these people that everything is just hunky-dory and they need to keep going down the path of democratic socialism and that Cuba is a beacon of humanity. I mean, I can't think of a worse team. I mean, SEAL Team 6 dropping in, well, with their asthma inhalers, with their Antifa masks, with their triple masked up, with their white people dreadlocks. I can't wait to see it. In fact, I wish there was a movie about it. It reminds me of the classic Woody Allen film Bananas, where you've got this white dude, this white Jew becomes the communist leader of Cuba and runs this whole, military operation. He's a goofball. That's what these people dropping in is exactly like. A bunch of rich white goobers dropping into an island nation and pretending to play revolutionary. And honestly, I hope they get the shit kicked out of them. I really hope that the people of Cuba who have had to deal with this look at these people, hear them coming in, and just decide to slap them upside the head and show them exactly the reality of the situation that they're entering. So it is going to be interesting to see, though. And I do think that, depending on what happens with these tankers, because this is the situation that arises because of these blockades, of course, is that you've a Russian tanker coming in. You already are in a cold war with Russia, right? Actually, it's a hot war that we're supporting, but we haven't launched our own missile attacks on Russia yet. But you have a classic opposition, in between Russia and the United States. They are now putting a direct pressure on us to say, okay, are they going to shoot at this tanker or not? Are they going to try to stop it? Are they going to try to create an international incident by disallowing this tanker to arrive with something like 780,000 barrels of oil on it? So that is a great concern. And I don't think that the United States wants to expand its military operations right now, considering the fact that we've undertaken a war in Iran without constitutional approval, the fact that we are still supporting the Ukrainians against Russia, the fact that we don't have enough armament to really do much because we already don't have enough facilities here to make enough bombs and missiles even to fund and fight the wars that we're doing now, or supply the wars we're doing now. So, I don't think that that's going to be an incident that's going to occur, but it does worry me. The fact that Russia was brazen enough to say, hey, suck on our big Russian hogs, we're sending the tanker through anyway, that's worrisome because that shows that they are not feeling that the United States is in an exceptionally strong position, and reasonably so, right? When you spread your military out, when you spread your focus out, when you're fighting wars on too many fronts, you're not in a position of strength. And I do not think we are in a position of strength right now. That being said, who knows what's really going on behind the scenes between the major nations? Who knows what's going on behind the scenes in regards to talks with China, talks with Russia, talks with these communist leaders, whether or not this is, an agreed upon thing that, hey, we'll replace the leadership in Cuba, we'll usher in a new era there, and then economic prosperity can spread on the island and whippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. My, oh my, what a wonderful day. But I don't know, something to monitor. Okay. Next thing talk about here is the Oscars. So Sunday night, I did in fact go to an Oscars party, partook in some Oscars eating and drinking and hooting and hollering. And most of it for me was eye rolling because I'll admit I did not watch a lot of the films this year. I don't think anybody watched a lot of the films this year because other than Sinners, a lot of people I think saw that. I think maybe, F1, maybe that was more consumery, but half of these other films I'd never heard of. I'd heard of Hamnet, but I don't know anybody who saw it outside of my little cadre of friends who get screeners sent to them. One battle after another, I think only liberals went and saw because that was clearly built and made for them. It was a cookie cutter, paint by numbers piece to make liberals wet and spooge in their seats. So that's exactly what it did. It was a no-brainer that it was going to win Best Picture. And then you have Sinners, which of course is, yes, many people said, essentially a Dusk Till Dawn ripoff. Now, I did not finish watching Sinners. I'll tell you why. because about halfway in, or not even halfway in, I didn't even get to the vampires. I'm just watching, and I just said, I'm sick of yet another movie that is just like white people are bad. That was it. That was the whole point of the movie. I was like, okay, great. I'm over this. I don't need to watch this crap. I'm sick of being berated with this message. I'm sick of this, this mentality and this culture that will never let this shit die. I'm just over it. And I'm not alone here, and being sick of hearing this and seeing it get risen to a point where it's being treated like it's this incredible work of art, and it's not. It was okay. For what I saw, it was okay. But again, I didn't like the premise and being berated. So I look at this thing being held up, this vampire movie, as though it's a cultural masterpiece. And you've got Ryan Coogler, the creator, winning Best Screenplay, which was ridiculous. And you've got it nominated for Best Picture. And you've got everybody saying, this is the greatest thing. And Ryan Coogler's he's a new cinematic leader. And my God, what a genius. I mean, this guy's going to remake X-Files. And do you want to guess who's the lead? Is it going to be a black woman? You nailed it. Of course it is. It reminds me of, oh God, I'm blanking on his name, the Key and Peele guy. Jordan Peele, right? That's his name. The guy who did Get Out. Get Out was okay. Another one, people treat it as though it's this incredible, mind-blowing piece. It was whatever. It wasn't that clever. It wasn't that interesting. It was fine. But I just like seeing these things, seeing these movies raised up to this level when you compare it to all of these other works of art in the past from cinematic history, they do not compare at all. It's not even close. And you've got these barking seals giving standing ovations at the Oscars. I'm sure 75% of that crowd is angry as fuck that these are the movies that they have to prop up. But they know if they speak out, they will be attacked. I mean, a recent example is Dennis Quaid, who's a big Trump supporter, very religious guy. He just got slammed by Nick Offerman, who played a great libertarian, but is actually a leftist shitbag. He's slamming Dennis Quaid because Dennis Quaid is outwardly spoken about his appreciation for Trump. Nick Offerman is enraged by this, and he's like, I don't know what he's doing. He's some, fucking Trump nut, gospel sayer. Nick Offerman is criticizing a man for speaking his preference. At the same time, Nick Offerman's so outraged about it, and he can't realize that he's the biggest fucking hypocrite because all these people in Hollywood do is put their politics and their personal bullshit first, which is why they've been losing money hand over fist. And Nick Offerman's out there smashing a guy while he's doing the exact same thing with no consciousness of it. That's like watching the Oscars every year. And I know for a fact that there's better films out there. I loved also that the K-pop Demon Hunters chick, she goes up there to accept this, the screenplay for best whatever film it was, animated film, and says, well, it's just nice to see people like us up there finally. What? Parasite was Korean. It just won 2 years ago for Best Picture. Like, the world exists outside of your specific racially focused leftist bullshit bubble. I really thought we were finally getting to the point where we're going to be moving past this race-centric world we live in and have people finally say we've had enough of this bullshit. And I think the younger generation, the ones that are in high school, are getting past that. At least I certainly hope they are. But to see these idiots still doing this crap while all these movies cannot and would not be able to get entered into the Oscars because they don't have the DEI requirements of having a purple-haired Eskimo, a trans black midget, and whatever other check marks you have to mark off to be even considered these days. The fact that these people cannot see how much they are hated. And by the way, proven out in the fact that the Oscars dropped another 9% in its viewership year over year, even though I thought Conan O'Brien did a pretty good job. But there's a reason. Because the films they're putting out are still DEI dog shit. The host, why I like Conan, had to give way to Jimmy Kimmel to present an award. And of course, Jimmy Kimmel goes up there and is a fucking political shitbag. So he's talking to, cracking about Donald Trump and fascism and CBS. I mean, it's just like nobody appreciates this. Nobody wants to see it. Move on. Okay. Final thing, guys, and then I'll wrap it up. It's going to be a little shorter episode because I am, as I said, tired. My brain's not working at its best capacity right now. but I wanted to leave you with something. I don't want to leave you in lurch. So this was fascinating. And there was an article that I'd seen which talked about the fact that a fruit fly had its consciousness transferred into a robot. Not a robot, I should say, a computer program that was able to have this fruit fly's consciousness, which is obviously very simplistic, right? Even calling it consciousness maybe a little bit too much. This fruit fly's mental capacity, its instincts, its urges. So they put it in the machine, and this thing navigated around and operated as a fruit fly would do within the context of this computer realm. Now, that's fascinating. It shows you that it can be done. You can take that, that mapping of the brain, the electrical impulses, you can translate over, which is fascinating if you're transferring your consciousness and continuing on after you're dead, right? Something I'm sure Elon Musk is very interested in. So there is that concept of everlasting life, or in creating a digital double of yourself, which has been bandied about in sci-fi for so long. So this is proof of concept of that, at least on a simplistic level. The concern I have for this, of course, is that if they can do this now, what is going to be the DARPA application? Now, don't forget, DARPA at one point in time, at least I think it was DARPA, maybe it was before that, maybe it was like the OSS, but had used animals for bombing runs. Famously, they strapped bombs to dolphins and trained dolphins to swim up and try to blow up Russian submarines. So you've got a premise on which the government has no qualms utilizing animals, animal brains, et cetera, to take out military targets, or at least attempt to do so. So the question is, how is the military going to adapt this technology? How are we going to now train these fruit flies to fly our missiles rather than having human beings do it, rather than having AIs do it, or some sort of combination therein? That really is concerning. And on another level, if you can, in fact, map this out and transfer this consciousness over, I also wonder whether or not the concept of, I guess, almost like an inception level of, you get somebody, you kidnap them, or you scan them. Are you able to then copy their brain waves and then put that in a computer, essentially to keep this consciousness as your own prisoner, to use it, to abuse it, to question it, to torment it, etc., without the knowledge of the person, or with the knowledge of that person? But it might be like a Severance situation, if you're familiar with that show, wherein they split the consciousness in the brain, and one half of the brain, the sleeping half, is essentially a slave to the waking half. That's also something that I could see coming to fruition with this type of thing, making a digital double that becomes a conscious digital slave, so that the rest of us could go about doing our, whatever it might be. And this was something that was promised to us by Elon Musk and others, right? That AI would create this massive boon, this incredible, everybody's going to be able to relax, everybody's going to get rich, everybody's going to do this and that. But what you're seeing in real time is people getting laid off left and right. So I don't know. It's fascinating, but like with any new massive breakthrough, the worries about abuse of a system like this are paramount. On the bright side, I guess you could say, all right, if you can continue that consciousness, you have everlasting life. But then, of course, questions would arise about contamination, about, false hopes, about whether or not you can really continue this if you believe in the soul, whether that soul continues into the digital realm or not, or if you basically just, like I said, trapped your consciousness but have no soul, so half of you is being tormented for the rest of eternity. These are the fever dreams that you think about after you've been drinking all day. At least yesterday. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Thanks for tagging along and playing with me here. I will be back with a better, longer, and more thoughtful show next time. I promise you. Don't forget, guys, buy Woke Word Wars. Subscribe to the Lions of Liberty podcast. And, of course, politics. All right. From me, Brian McWilliams, from the Lions of Liberty Network, and from Mean Age Daydream. Keep those electric eyes on me, babe, and keep that ray gun to my head. Talk to you later.